Hello, I'm Ajahn Jyotipalo. Welcome to Sauntering into Silence. This can be quite a long story, so hopefully I can be brief. Don't listen to them. One of the ways that I can talk about how I got into meditation and eventually became a Buddhist monk was, this was about 25 years ago. I was trekking in Nepal with some friends, and just due to a whole bunch of really bad circumstances, I got separated from them and came down with altitude sickness. And for, I think it was at least 2 solid days, I knew at any moment I could have died. The conditions could have just changed a little bit. That would have been the end of it. The last day before sort of this fever and the condition broke and I got down to a safer altitude, I'd hired a porter to get me down to this town called Lukla, which is an airport town in the Solo-Khumbu region of Nepal, which is where Mount Everest is. Got to this guest house and I was just like, a day's walk away from the airport at that point. The hostess of the family was really concerned with me and she wanted me to eat. And I remember first I went into this little kind of bedroom area. I had a Snickers bar. Every time I was eating, it would cause these really high fevers to come on, but I hadn't probably eaten anything all day, so I ate a Snickers bar. I was lying in this bed. All of a sudden, my whole body became really warm, and it was actually kind of pleasant. And I remember just when I was breathing, I could actually get the sense that I could see the molecules of air, and as I was breathing, I could breathe them in, and I'd feel them sort of go through my body, the warmth sort of coming through my body and then sort of coming out my hand, and then being in the air, and then I'd breathe it in again. And I was kind of seeing these molecules as colors. It was sort of psychedelic. But I was just watching this process of exhaling, breathing in, exhaling, breathing in. At some point I had this idea, it was like a tree sort of breathing in carbon monoxide and letting out oxygen. As soon as I started kind of contemplating that, these little people came into the room. I'm guessing they were probably about 18 inches tall. And they came over to me and they started working on my body, around my stomach area, and they were unlatching boxes and doing things. And then all of a sudden a whole bunch of them came out. I don't know where they came out of, but they came over to me and they started pulling this huge box out of the area where my stomach was. They carried it over to the corner of the room, set it down, and they all vanished. And I was sitting there looking at it and I realized it was a coffin. This kind of disturbed me, but I got up out of bed and I went over and I was looking at it. The coffin was closed, but I was just looking at it, and I was sitting on the edge of the bed, in through this sort of curtain that was dividing the room I was in from the main part of the guest house. A friend of mine who was living in New Hampshire, he was not in Nepal, but walked into the room and he came and sat next to me, and my name was Don. He goes, "Don, there's something inside you that's killing you." I was like, "What, a parasite?" He goes, "No, it's a snake." And then he went over to the casket, opened it up, and this man was what he did for kind of a hobby was he collected people's snakes that they had sort of abused, like overfed, and then got bored with, and so he would rescue them and bring them back to health. And right before I left, he gave me this card that had Conan the Barbarian saying on it was, "That which doesn't kill you makes you strong." His wife, on the same card, wrote a Helen Keller comment, which was, "If you have to choose, choose life." And they both became very significant. But Todd goes over and he opens the cat. But my friend went over and opened the casket, and this huge snake, it was white, it was a head as big as a human head, sort of started to kind of come out. And it was not aggressive at all. My friend had this sack in his back pocket, and he pulls it out and kind of wrestles a little bit with the snake and stuffs it into the sack, and then he leaves the room. And I go over and I'm examining the casket, and I was sort of like, this symbolizes my stomach, but there's no holes in it, like how does food get in? I go and sit on the bed and I'm sort of thinking about this, and my friend walks back in. He's got this kind of disgusted look on his face, like, "Can't you take care of yourself?" He pulls out this little sort of hand drill, goes over and he drills a hole in the lid in the bottom of the casket, and then he walks out. And as he's walking through the curtain, the hostess of the house walks in. She looks at me and she says, "Kane," which is rice or food. And I was like, okay, well, if Todd went through all that trouble, I better go eat. So I get up and I go into the main room, and they've got this really beautiful wood stove, and it's like a wooden, or actually a dirt floor in the kind of living room. And there's a bunch of Nepali Sherpa women there, and they're sorting beans or something on the floor. And I'm looking around like, where am I supposed to sit? And there's this chest, and it's got full of a bunch of yak coats or something on top of it, fur coats on it. And so I jump up onto this little chest, and I'm sitting there cross-legged, and the women just start laughing hysterically. It's like, I can imagine it's almost like, somebody from a third world country comes to our house and looks around, doesn't know where to sit, so they sit on the dining room table. And but they bring me over a plate of potatoes, and I eat those, and then she brings me over a plate of rice. And I remember I was just so dehydrated, probably I couldn't eat the rice, had to chew it like 50 times before I could swallow it. And then as I'm sitting there, all of a sudden I notice this really beautiful chanting happening just to my left, and I look down and there's a kerosene lamp, and right in the center of the flame there's this little tiny creature that's dancing, and he's singing, chanting. And so I kind of get down really close, and I'm looking, and it's this little tiny figure, and he's chanting and dancing. And then on the small of his hip, there's this little tiny elephant who's also chanting and singing. And on the shoulder, there's a monkey. And at this time, I knew nothing about Hinduism or any of the deities in Hinduism, and I was just totally blown away by this. And then I had to use the bathroom, and so the ladies all laughed and took me out to this field, and I was kind of confused until I realized the field was the bathroom. And then I came back in, I ran over to the kerosene lamp, and it was just a kerosene lamp. And the next day was really hard getting to Lukla, the airport town, but I got there, and it was there that I had this extreme fever, where and I was in this disorienting pain. And I remember thinking at one point, it's like the pain that I was in, on a scale from 0 to 100, if you broke your leg in a car accident, that pain would be a 60. And I was like 97, 98 on the scale, just unbearable. And I remember thinking to myself, I want this pain to end. But before I could actually totally form that thought, this voice outside of me, clear as day, just sort of said, if you wish for that, you're dead. Is that what you want? And I remember thinking, nope, I actually need to ask forgiveness from my parents. Not that I'd done anything terrible, but I needed to just let them know I loved them, appreciated them. And so I said, no, I'm not ready, but I need to be separated from this pain. And I came out of my body, floating up in the upper corner of the room. Just everything that I perceived as who and what I was just ceased to exist. There was a sense of self, there was eyesight, and there was thought, but sense of weight. The fever went completely away, the pain went completely away, sounds went completely away, weight went away, cold, heat, everything like that just ceased to exist, and it was very profound. And then I had the fear that my body was going to get up and leave the room, and I'd be stuck without a body. And as soon as I had that fear, shows how attached I was to the body, I went right back into it, and the fever, the pain immediately returned, and I passed out. So the next morning, though, I woke up. I won't say what happened, but the fever passed eventually, early on in the morning. It was funny. I looked out the window of the guest house I was staying in. I could see the airport. They only sold tickets the day of the flights. I looked down, there's this huge line. I was like, okay, well, I'm not getting out today. And then a few minutes later, I looked back, and the line was completely gone. And I just thought, well, I'm going to go down there and see if I can talk to the manager and see if, emergency, they can get me on or something. And I walked in the door, and the general manager was sitting there, and he goes, if you are wanting to go to Kathmandu, today is your lucky day. I undersold the flight by 1 seat. And boom, gave him the money. 2 hours later, I was on a flight heading back down to Kathmandu, which is about 3,000 feet, where Lukla is about 9,000 feet. And so just getting down from that elevation, also the altitude sickness, lingering effects I still had were completely gone. But for me, that experience of being out of the body, just really sort of experiencing that there is consciousness outside of the independent of the body. I still tell people, like, I have no idea what happens at the moment of death, if that even was the moment of death. I know what the Buddha says, I know what other religions say, but for me that was just this sort of, really awakening moment of, life is, what I had assumed life was is probably very, very different. So in conclusion, having that experience of the being out of the body, it really did give me this really strong belief, strong conviction that when the physical body dies, there is a continuation, that it's not the end. And immediately this insight came that if that's true, then that means everything that we do in this world has consequences, is significant. And I can probably directly, correlate that insight to, I was already seeking, but it definitely led me into the monastic life. So, there we are.